If you are somebody who's been wanting to learn React, but does not have tons of time to sit down and learn React, and you just want to get started quickly, this video is for you. In this video, I have combined my 11 years of experience with React and working as a staff engineer at companies like PayPal and Slack to bring you this course that has everything you need to know to get started with React. We're gonna build a Netflix app together. By the end of this video, you will have a working version of a Netflix clone. You're going to learn what React is, what's state management in React. You're gonna use Zustand, you're gonna use Tailwind, you're gonna use TanStack router, TanStack query, and you're gonna add authentication through Clerk. I'm going to give you exercises and homework to do, and you're going to build them yourself. Join this Discord and put your questions. I will take a look at every single question and answer your doubts. Now let's become a React developer. Now, before we get started with anything, I want you to plan out this learning phase. The process of learning is as important as the stuff that you're going to be learning itself. If you're somebody who struggles with ADHD, like me, how you approach this is also important. So I want you to set up a coding ritual for you. First thing, set an intention. Write down what you're going to do today. Then set a duration of how long you're going to do this. I like to do 2 to 3 hours, and I like to divide them in 25 minutes of time. So you can set a 3-hour goal of working 25 minutes at a time, and then you take a 5-minute break. And finally, your space around you and the vibe you create while coding is so important. Learning React or learning anything is not a destination, it's a journey. And how you approach this journey is also as important as getting there. Imagine you're going to your favorite destination and you are driving there. You're not just going to sit in the car and just look at the mirror the whole time. You're going to enjoy it. You're going to eat some snacks. You're going to have a drink. You're going to play some music. You're going to talk to your friends or your family, and you're going to try to enjoy the journey. Coding is the same way. Now, you might have a different process of how you like to set the mood, whether it's making tea, I got my drink here, or whether it is putting on nice music, whether it is turning on your favorite lights, whatever it is that makes you happy, go ahead and do that right now. Okay, so now that our vibe is set, now the next step is my coding setup. For my coding setup, I like to use Visual Studio Code. I also have GitHub Copilot IntelliSense added. So if I add something like actually automatically fills in what I'm about to type. I find it super helpful, especially if I'm trying to write a function that is a commonly done function like console log, useEffect, things like that. I've got the React Dev documentation open, and I use this all the time for learning about hooks. And I encourage you to keep this documentation open as well. And as we are learning a topic, continue to read this as an extra reading material. Also, if you're watching this before October 7th or 8th, I will be speaking at ReactConf, so I would love to see you there, and you can join the live stream for free. Now that everything is set up, let's get going. Today, we're going to use Vite to set up React. Vite is the most popular build tool today, and this is the standard way of setting up with React. Let's get started. So I'm going to get npm create Vite latest. And actually, we're going to use pnpm. Open my terminal, and we're going to start creating a new project. Project name is, I already have a name for this. Current directory is not empty. Remove existing files. I'm going to set up React. SWC is a compiler written in Rust. For our case, we're going to keep TypeScript. And now we're going to do pnp install and pnpm dev. And that should get a localhost 5173. And if I click on this count, our React app is now set up. Let's take a quick look through the files that Vite created for us. So as you can see in the source folder, we have an assets folder, which is where this icon comes from, React SVG. And then we have the app.tsx file, which is actually the main file. So if you implement anything in here, if you change anything in here, you write Netflix, this is what updates our app. This also has hot module reload unenabled, which basically means that as soon as you update, you will see the update on the right side. You don't need to reload the page. Because we have TypeScript enabled in this, that's why the files have extension of .tsx instead of .jsx, which is the regular JavaScript JSX extension. We also have an app.css file already set up for us, which is where we're going to be adding our CSS. When you start an app with Vite, it usually starts in strict mode. One thing to note is that when you run an app with Vite, it starts in strict mode. What is strict mode? Strict mode actually helps you identify bugs in development that may get unnoticed in production. For example, it may run some of your functions twice. So if you start noticing bugs in development because some function rendering multiple times, take a look at your code and just know that strict mode is enabled and React will try to warn you about errors. And that's your project structure. There's also the Vite config file, which is actually helpful later on when you want to install new plugins in your app. But as of now, the important folder that you need to focus on is the assets folder, is the source folder, which is where we're going to be putting our components. I want to show you what the data actually looks like because we're going to be dealing with this data a lot. So we're going to be fetching the TMDB API, and I want you to go ahead, create an account in TMDB and get a token. This token will be helpful in calling this API. But before we even go forward, let's take a look at what our movies look like in TMDB. Now, this is an endpoint that we'll be calling, which is /movie/popular, and this gives us a list of current popular movies. So as you can see, we have a results array. We have an ID, which is what we'll be using. We've got the overview, which is kind of description. We've got the title. We've got an average vote count as well, which helps us determine the popularity of the movie. We are going to be using this, and it also has a poster path. So this is what our movie looks like. This will be helpful in understanding what our component should look like and what the final data would look like. Let's set up a new folder within source, which is where we're going to store our components. And now let's set up the basic structure of the Netflix app. This is a screenshot of Netflix today. And if you look at this app, think about how you would divide this app into smaller components. And this is the step that I want you to do anytime you get a Figma design, a design that you need to implement. So in this app, you'll see at the top that we have a header at the top, which contains the logo of Netflix. It contains the language selection menu and the authentication menu where you can sign in or sign out. It has a hero banner at the top, which has a background of an image that has a bunch of movies in it. And then in the center of it, we have some text. At the bottom here, we also have a banner that asks the user to join Netflix. And finally, at the bottom, we have a list of movies. So if you look at this page, there are a few components that come to mind. The header, the hero image, a CTA banner, a CTA component, and the movies list. You'll also notice that all of the content of this app is actually within this margin. So there's a container that keeps all of the content within the container, even though the page is full width. This is important because when you're thinking of responsive design, you need to know which constraint you're operating under. So let's implement this app so that we have these basic components set up. We're going to set up the header component, the hero component, and the movies list component. We're not going to worry about the CTA banner. Okay. So in my components folder, I'm going to create a folder called header.tsx, hero.tsx, and movieslist.tsx. And let's call it movies actually. Okay, so now that we have our file set up, now is the time to add our component. Now a functional component in React is super simple. What it needs is a return statement that just returns a JSX element. So we're going to return header here. And then I'm going to export default header. And I'm actually I'm going to do the same for all of these. And now the only thing I need to do is include those components that I just created. So I'm going to get rid of everything that I had before and clean up this app. And I'm going to include the header component, the hero component, and then my movies component. Hero component. Cool. And now if you see, we've got header, hero, and movies. So this sets up the basic components in our app. Now there are multiple ways of styling a React component. You could use CSS modules, which looks like this, where you have a class name and you define the actual CSS in a module that gets locally assigned to that component. You could also provide styles inline, where you could have a style attribute and provide the actual CSS within that style attribute. However, for this crash course, we're actually going to use Tailwind. Tailwind is a widely popular way of adding styles to a React component, and I particularly like it because it helps to get started real quick and reuse classes without having to redefine the same classes over and over again. So let's set up Tailwind. Setting up Tailwind is actually super simple. So let's copy this. This creates a Tailwind config file, and after installing the npm module, the next step is to add Tailwind CSS to Vite. So I've imported that here and added that in the plugin. The final step is to add Tailwind CSS to the app. The final step is to add Tailwind CSS to the CSS. So once I have Tailwind CSS plugin added, I can add a class name. I can add a class name to my component itself, and that should update the way my CSS component renders. So now you'll see hero component looks different. I want you to try this out and play around with different class names. All of the styles that Tailwind supports can be found in Tailwind CSS documentation. And there's a handy search functionality here through which you can look for something like bold, and it should give you the different class names that are supported for providing a style like that. Now here's a homework for you. Apply Tailwind classes to the header component and the hero component so it looks like this. The background image is going to be available to you in the main branch of GitHub. So find it there and add Tailwind classes so it looks as close to this design as possible. If you get stuck, you can always find the answer, but I encourage you to try this out and give it a shot yourself before looking at the answers. And if you have a question, drop it in the Discord chat. While we're building our app, one thing that we have to make sure as we are progressing through the app is that it is responsive, which means that if you're on a wide screen or desktop, the component should look pretty. If you're on a small screen, the styles should still look nice and allow the user to properly view the site. So let's take a look at this to see if this is responsive. One way to do that is by changing the width of your window, but another way to do that is by clicking on Inspect, clicking on this little icon here that shows you a laptop and a device. And this will let you test in multiple widths. So what I like to do is first of all check my app in the laptop mode, which looks like this. You'll notice the header looks fine, the hero image looks fine, but this movies thing is way too much on the left. It needs some margin. Then we're going to look at tablet, and same issue with movies on the tablet, but the text looks fine. And then if you come down to mobile, you'll notice that there's a bit more padding on the left and there's a lot of padding here. So this could be improved. Again, movies is still flush to the left, but there's a lot of padding here. So let's go ahead and fix that. So you'll notice here that we have a class name of px6, which is why we have this huge padding. In order to fix this for just mobile mode, Tailwind actually gives us handy class called small size screen, and we're going to set our px to be 3. And we're going to update the default class to be medium and up, which means that if we go to something like an iPad, this still looks good. And if we go to a laptop, it still looks good. I also don't like the font size of this. This is too big, especially for small screen. So for small, I'm going to add a text of small. Okay, I'll also fix the margin top of this text. I think this looks much better now. Let's make sure that this looks good in iPad. Nice. And make sure it looks good in laptop. Still looks good. Okay, good. I'm happy with this. Let's move on to fixing movies. And the reason movies looks like this is because it hasn't been implemented. So let's add a class name. And the reason movies looks like this is because movies component doesn't have anything, any classes added. So in order to fix this, we're actually going to assign a new class called container. And this class is actually a CSS class that we've set in app.css. So the classes that you apply to your components don't only have to be Tailwind classes. They can also be new classes that you create just for your component. And now this is looking in a pretty good shape where we can start working on movies component. So let's get going. Oh, there's an extra margin here now. So let's go ahead and fix this. Which is going to be in header. React flex. Where is my margin? Top 0, left 0, right 0, py. Margin width px. Don't want any because now I've added margin automatically. Good. Now everything is flush to the left. Perfect. This is how I want it. I actually added an extra padding on the left. Oh, I know why. That is because I set everything within the container margin, but I don't need hero to be in container. So for that, I'm going to move this container out of here, move this out of here, move this into header. This class name gets container because I want this to be within container. Hero, I don't want to be within container. And then the movies, I want it to be within container. Nice. And now, there we go. Nice. Looks much better. And this is a, oh, I need some header, needs some margin bottom, py5. Is it just me or does it look like it doesn't have margin bottom? I'm going to add a margin bottom. Py margin bottom of 8. Okay. Now this actually is quite flush to the top. So let's fix this. There should be a little bit of padding at the bottom and a little bit of margin at the bottom and a little bit of margin at the top. Now I want you to notice something. I have added a margin bottom of 8, but it's not adding any margin. Why is that? Let's inspect this. So if I inspect this element, I'll see that this element actually, which is gonna be this one. I've got margin bottom of 8 added here, but why is it not working? That's because this padding is coming from container element, and then the container element overwrites margin. So even though I've got my Tailwind utility applied, which is margin bottom of 8, container element overrides that. So just remember this. Your CSS classes will likely have a higher precedence than the Tailwind classes because the CSS classes are more specific. So in order to fix that, let's actually get rid of container from here, and we're going to add styles to this ourselves. So remember, we needed margin bottom of 8, which has been added. My God, I cannot see anything. Margin bottom. I'm going to do margin bottom auto. Okay. After a little bit more CSS tweaks, this looks pretty decent now. Cool. Let's get into making the movies component now. All right, the next step is to implement this movies list component, which is called trending now in the screenshot. Now, if you notice this, we have a a list of movies and it is scrollable usually. There are 6 movies and 7th is just a little visible. Before we even start writing any code, let's plan this out. How are we going to build this? What we're going to do is we're going to copy this text, and this is a sample text that we're going to use, or mock data that we're going to use to build our movie component. And this is going to be even before we integrate with any API. So having mock data is really helpful when you build a component like this, because your backend team may be working on the API and the data may not be ready, but that shouldn't be a blocker for you. So you can work on mock data. Now we're going to copy this data over, and I'm going to paste this data in my, I'm not worried too much about where I put this, because I'm going to get rid of this anyway. So I'm going to put this right here, const movie data equals. This is the data, and I think I've got 20 items in here, if I'm not wrong. Why this is important is because this is exactly the kind of data I'm going to be working with when I actually integrate with this API. This is exactly the shape of the data. So this will help me create my components and get it ready whenever the API is ready. Now, as you can imagine, this is a scrollable component, and we have the ability to see only 6 items. Everything else should be an overflow hidden. Also remember that the width of this is the same width as the container itself. There are these numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 added, which looks super pretty. So we're going to do that as well. So let's get going. Now, this movies component actually is going to be called trending now component, and here I'm going to add the title of trending what is this, H2 H3 trending now, update unused declaration for update this, and this hopefully already updates this from trending now. Okay, perfect. Open this up as well. Good. Okay. Now, wait, why does it still say movies? From components. Oh, right. Rename this to, okay, perfect. So now I've got trending now here, and the style also looks correct. So always remember that you want to create atomic components that can be reusable. So here, if you think about it, this can be a movie list, and this card itself would be a separate component called movie card. So let's create those 2 components. We're going to create a new component here called MovieList.tsx, and then another component called movie card.tsx. Alrighty, we can pass this movies data into this movie list, and we also want to make sure that we check that movie data dot results length greater than 0. Then we want to call this component movie list. We don't have movie list defined. Let's go ahead and define this. Import. Import. That's weird. Okay, import movie list, and I'm going to go ahead and const movie list, and this gets default exported movie list and accepts a list of movies greater than 0. And now we want to do movie list component, movie data dot results. All right. Okay, I'm also going to turn prettier on. Create configuration file, create it in source.prettier. Okay, nice. Why is this weird error coming? H4 return div. Let's try this again. What if I have movie list? Okay, movies equals movie data dot results. Remember that I only want to render movie list if there is any value in movie data, right? Because if this object is empty, or if there was a problem fetching that data, I don't want to display movie list. So we're going to check for, this is how you do conditional rendering. So you check for movie data dot results dot length greater than 0. Now, if that is true, Then we want to display this. Otherwise, we can display a component that says no movies are found. No movies were found. And then we end the conditional. Movies equals movies. This goes here. This goes here. Okay, that looks better. We're going to clean this up as well. Format document with... that's not working for me. Format document with prettier. There you go. Okay, nice. Okay, so let's recap what we're doing here. Now here we've created a conditional rendering. So what we're doing is we're checking. This is how you do conditional rendering in JSX. So you check the length of movie data.results.length, check if that is greater than 0. You also want to check that results exist on this. And if the length is greater than 0, then we want to render movies with the data that was sent to us. Otherwise, you want to show no movies were found. And a quick way to test that this conditional operator works is by changing the greater than equal to less than equal to. And now you also notice that I've got no movies were found here. Cool. So let's pass in the movies. We've got to MovieList. And now let's render movies in MovieList component. How do we want to render movies? We've already got movies coming in. Now rendering actually is simple. So we can return a div that has a list maps over every item in movies. And for each of those movies, I want to create a list item with the name of movie dot. Let's see, what does our data look like? We've got results, and within that we've got an object, and the name of the movie is within movie.name. So let's render that. Let's just render name for now. Movie.name. Okay, nice. I've got all of those movies coming in here. However, there is a problem. In order for React to keep track of which element has been rendered, especially if movies object can change, we need to make sure that we provide it a unique key. And this is where the movie.id comes in. So we want to make sure that if we're ever mapping through a list of items, we're providing a unique key so that React knows when to clean up this item if this item has been removed from the list, or when to add more items. You could use index here, but it is not preferred. If you have a unique identifier like an ID, that is always preferred because this key needs to be unique and stable. Stable is important here because if the length of the array has changed, the index would change as well. Therefore, index is not a stable method of adding key. So if you've got ID, add ID. Now, so we've got all of our movies, all of our popular movies in here. Perfect. Actually, this is shows. That's fine. Doesn't matter. But this shows you how to loop through a data object, pass in a prop. This is the prop, and render multiple items through this list. Now to recap, this example showed us 3 important things. One is conditional rendering, in which we checked for the length of the item, and if it exists, then we want to show movie lists. Otherwise, we want to show a fallback component where we say no movies were found. Now within that movies list component, we are accepting props, which is how we pass data around to a component. Once we've got movies in here, we've already checked the length in the previous components, so we don't have to worry about it here. We can map through this item, and we can create a new element here by mapping through every movie item. We have to provide a stable key. Here, that key is ID. As a last resort, you could use index, but if you have an ID available or something that is unique, use a unique item to mark as a key. Now remember that we're using TypeScript here, so it's important that we also keep adding the types as we are typing. So I've created 2 types here called movie and movie list props, which accept ID and name. Both of those are required. I'm going to keep this in source. I'm going to create a new file called types.ts, and I will move all of my types into this type. And import movie and movie list props. Nice. Type movie and movie list props from types. Nice. Okay, cool. This looks good. Now let's go ahead and style this. Now, oftentimes in a company, you would not be the one writing all of the components from scratch. Typically, there is a design system library that you can inherit. Sometimes company also inherit external libraries like Shadcn, Material UI. Now I'm going to show you how to integrate with an external library so you can incorporate components that are already built and maintained by somebody else instead of having to rewrite a component from scratch every single time. We're going to take a look at Shadcn library. Now, this is a very popular library at the time of recording this, and you can check out this library for your needs as well. I highly recommend this. It's super easy to use. The component that we're going to use is called card. Okay. Now, to install this is actually super easy. All you got to do is copy this, doink, and then come to your editor, poink, and clear your garbage, and then paste it. Derp. Yes, I do want to. Yes, please. No import alias found. What? Oh. Okay. Open tsconfig. No import alias found, it said. How do I do that? That was like something like that. Okay, hold on. It says open the documentation, so why not? Open. Okay. Open documentation. All right. What does it say? Hold on. What? Oh, yeah. I have to edit tsconfig file and actually add this compiler option. So let's go ahead and add that. Not in here, in here. Okay. Add a comma. La, 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 la. Cool. Okay. Now I've added this thingy. Basically, it just tells the compiler that anytime I encounter this kind of pattern, an @ symbol and anything after that, basically resolve this to the source folder. And why we're going to do that is because when it installs this, you might have to install this again. Yes, I would like to create, and then neutral color works for me. Cool. Okay. Can't resolve TW animate CSS. Okay. That looks good. Cool. Now the next step in the documentation of this, adding this card, is that you have got to do this kind of symbol. You got to do @ and then component /UI/card. This is why it was complaining about it. Okay. So let's do this. I'm gonna copy, and then I'm just gonna do in my movie list component, move away, movie list, movie. Hold on, where do I? Oh, I already have movie card. Okay. But in my movie card, I'm gonna import this, and then I'm gonna create const movie card equals return a card component, and then I'm also gonna add a div around it. No, I don't need divs around it. No extra divs, please. And then this actually sends me a movie. It actually accepts a movie. Export default movie card there. And then I probably don't need any of these, so I'm going to get rid of that. And then import movie card from this. Cool. And then now, instead of actually rendering just the movie name, I am going to render a card, and then I'm going to pass in the movie to this card. Okay. Movie to this. This is how we pass a prop. Remember, passing a prop is super simple. Oh, movie card, not card. Passing a prop is super simple. Remember, you just name the prop and then pass the actual data that you want to send in. And then when you're accepting the prop, you just got to accept it through an object, through this D structure. So remember, this actually comes like this. Like if you don't add anything, this would be part of the props object. So if you destructure it, you'll get movie out of it. And now you just got to pass in, you can say card, and then I'm going to just say like paragraph. And let's see if we've got movie.name coming through. Oh, I know. I got to add an alias as well. Okay, add a config path. Some more stuff needs to happen. Thank God I have the solution right here. Plugins, and then a dorp on this and a dorp on that, and a resolve and a hoop and dir name. Where's dir name coming from? Dir name. Hold on. What else do I need to do? Where's that? Edit TS config, blah, 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 compiler options, reference. Oh, wait. The base URL properties section of TS config. Oh, base URL. Did I add that? Base URL, TS config. Base URL. Yes, I did. Okay, that. And then edit TS config. Oh, I haven't done this. tsconfig.app.json. I gotta do this. What do you want? Hold on. I actually have this in, and then update Vite config. Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah. Right. So let's do that. And you thought it was easy. Okay. Update this. Okay, what's the next thing? And then add alias, and then React plugin, already added that. You just got to add this. I already added that. Vite config. Vite config. Okay, VSTS. TSVS. At path resolve, dir name. Run the shard. Okay, copy this. Which color you want? I want blue. Okay, already exists. PNPMI, already done. Reload and then restart. I think there's one more thing that I need to do. Cannot find this because I gotta install this. PNPM, I save this guy. All right, PNPM run dev. Import must precede all other statements. Oh yeah, right. This is actually coming from app.css. Basically, it's saying that this needs to come on top of this. And I think this needs to come on top of this. Reload this. What else? Hat module reload. Hat. Console. Cannot find source components. UI card does not. Oh yeah. Does not provide an export default. That is because we gotta go back in here and do a yoink and a yoink. Yeah. Okay, cool. So those look like cards, and that's what I expect. Okay. Now, one more thing is I also have the name of the movie in here. Good. Let's use some Tailwind styling. Fix these cards so that they actually look like these cards. To do this, styling is actually pretty simple. We gotta add a width and a height according to this. We gotta make sure that this is a flex box so that we see everything in one row. And this should be scrollable with an overflow of hidden. Oh, no, with the overflow of scroll. So let's do some styling. All right, now here we are with this trending now section looking pretty. And guess what? It is scrollable as well. So let's take a look at how we did that. We're using Tailwind for styling here as well. One thing to remember is that when there is an overflow on the right side, we could use an overflow X scroll to allow the user to scroll through the list. I have kept the overflow Y to be visible. I've added a little bit of padding and margin, and the one thing that I've done to make it look pretty is to hide the scroll bar. Otherwise, you would see a bottom scroll bar, and we know that in Netflix, we don't see that. Then we are using the card component like before. No change there. The only thing I've added there is added a little bit of padding, a little bit of padding, a little bit of transition, and the thing that really makes it cool is when you hover on it, you will see that it actually scales to 105%, which is what gives that really cool zoomed in effect that you would have seen on Netflix. And we're doing all of this using Tailwind. How sweet! Okay, now here's the homework for you. On Netflix, you'll notice that it has this 1, 2, 3 numbers on the left side of the card. Your homework is to implement this. You can take the help of Netflix's own website, inspect the CSS, and add classes yourself. You have the ability to use CSS modules for this, or you can use Tailwind, or you can use inline styles. I want to see how you implement this. Put your GitHub in the comments. I'm going to take a look at how you implemented them. And one hint is that you can use the before pseudo selector to add content, such as 1, 2, 3. Now, how you're going to do that and how you're going to style it is going to be the part you have to figure out. But I'm sure you can do it. I want to see how you implement this. Put that in. Good luck. So far, you've learned how to add a component, how to add multiple components by conditionally rendering to make sure that the element only render if there is data. You've also learned how to make sure that you provide a unique key, which is important for React to ensure that it can clean up a component properly and update components properly. You also added Tailwind styling and learned what CSS modules are. If you like this video so far, give this a big thumbs up and subscribe to this channel if you haven't yet. This really helps this video and lets the algorithm know that this video is worth watching. Thank you for sharing and supporting my channel. Now, let's add the fun part. One of the coolest features of Netflix is the search functionality. You'll notice here that there's a search button which lets you type something, and when you click, it shows up which movies are similar to the one that you just typed. There's a bunch of things happening here. One, we're able to react to the user typing and show search phrases. And then we're also able to look through our movie database and pull up the movies that match the phrase that the user has entered. This is an important part of a web app because it adds the ability for the user to interact with the app and see state update, see changes updated. And this is what makes frontend super fun. So let's go ahead and implement this. We're going to implement a search functionality. Now, so far we've already integrated with Shadcn as our design system, but we also need the search icon. Where can we pull up that search icon? For that, there is another library called Lucid React. Lucid React? I don't know. Lucid React. We're going to integrate with this. So in order to integrate this, we just have to install Lucid React. We can add any icon we need by just importing it from Lucid React. So the one that we're going to use is going to be search, this one. Okay, so all we need to do is import this way. So let's go ahead and do that. I've already installed this. I've already installed Lucid React in my React app. So all I have to do is import the search component. Now, before we proceed with adding search in this header, let's think about how we want to divide our header. Now, as you can see, our header component doesn't just include the logo React Flix, but it also will now include a new component. And this is a common decision that you will make in your React app, which is, should I add a component like right here and say search, search icon like that, or if I should create a new component in here called search. This is a decision you will be frequently making. And I want you to think about this for a moment. Pause the video and tell me, what will you do? The thing is, there are no right or wrong answers here. It really depends on what your new component is supposed to do. And at this point, the decision I want you to keep in your mind is that if your component performs a lot of interactivity, takes in a lot of data, or modifies the data on the page in a certain way, it is important to keep that module separate, that component separate. So if this was just a text, it's okay to keep it as is. But if I'm using this component to modify a lot of data, it is much better to separate this out into a separate component to keep our components modular and small. This is also a programming principle called do one thing, which means that make sure your components are doing a single clearly defined goal. So in this case, search component is a small enough goal that we can separate out into its own component. So let's go ahead and implement this component. I've added a new component here called search bar, which is where I have put the search icon from Lucid React. Now we're going to learn about event handling. So what happens when a user clicks on this button? We want to do something, right? In order to be able to catch that event when a user clicks something, we can use a prop called onClick. So this onClick prop is similar to the document.add event listener onClick, which is something that you would add in JavaScript. So this onClick prop in React is the same thing as adding an add event listener in JavaScript. React provides us this handy prop called onClick, which lets you do the same functionality as adding an event listener with the type of click and then passing in the listener. So let's see how to do this. There is a whole page of documentation here on React's official website that talks about responding to events, and I encourage you to read it. In order to actually add a button that can click, we can add an onClick prop. Now let's experiment with this. So I've got a very simple onClick handler that says search click, and now if I click on this, it says search clicked. Cool. Oh, however, hold on. You'll notice that I've added an onClick to a div. What do you think is the problem with this? Put it in the comments. If you said the problem is semantic HTML, you're right. Now, div is actually not a semantic element. In order to have clicking functionality, we have a proper semantic element called button. So always remember that when you're using React or building any form of web app, regardless of which platform it is, always use semantic HTML. Not only does it provide you free functionality out of the box, it is also essential for assistive technologies like screen readers who rely on the semantic HTML to able to understand the content on the page. So now we're going to use button. And now it should do the same thing. If I click, it says search clicked. Perfect. All right, so let's think about what we want to do here. When I click the search, I want a input field to pop up. When I click this search, I want this input field to pop up. Okay, and then I can put something in this. Let's implement so that it actually shows up an input field, and then we can put something in there. If we click this, we still have the search functionality working. Now, if we look in this search, if we click this, it opens up a little like input field. Okay, so let's go ahead and add an input field. So an input field is a simple input element with the type of text, and then the placeholder I need is I'm going to add search. And it's giving me some extra class name, so why not? Let's just take it. Okay, now you'll notice that there is a error that pops up that says adjacent JSX elements must be wrapped in an enclosing tag. Did you want to use a JSX fragment? And this is where I want to introduce the concept of fragments. So what are fragments? Now the thing is, when you return a component from React, React wants you to always return a single component. A single div element, a single button, whatever it may be, it needs to be a single child. However, in some cases, like for example, the one that we're doing here, we don't want an extra div. So we can pass in with a fragment which lets you basically group elements without a wrapper node. And why this is helpful is because you may have situations such as this, where you don't want to add an extra node. So fragments are useful because grouping elements with a fragment has no effect on layout or styles, unlike if you wrapped it in an element. So if I go ahead and inspect this, you'll notice that I've got a div and I've got an input and a button here. I don't have an extra div in here. And this can be super helpful when you're trying to avoid adding extra nodes. But I do want to add an extra node, and I want to give it a flex box. There, that looks better. Okay, but remember, like I only want to show this search field if this button is clicked. But if this button is not clicked, or if I click away somewhere, I don't want to show this. How can we do that? We just learned about conditional rendering. Now, what if I add a attribute or a variable so that I can check for that, something like should show search. And if that is true and I've set it to true, then I should show the search bar. I can actually toggle this should show search if I have just clicked the button. Now, how do I create this should search? You can imagine I could probably have like a var of should show search or like let of should show search. Wow, that is a hard word. Should show search equals false. Okay. But the problem with this is that when you click, let's try this to see. I'll show you what the problem is. Okay, on click, I want to set this should show search equals not of should show search. Wow, holy shit, man, I cannot say that word. So when this is clicked, I just set should show search to be a toggled version, or let's actually set it to true. Okay. Now, let's see what happens. When I click on this, nothing is actually happening. It's not updating should show search. And that is because React does not control this should show search. In order for React to be able to manage this should show search, it should become a React state, which is where the hook useState comes in. This is an incredibly helpful React hook. And I will show you in the documentation. useState is a hook that you will use all the time. useState is a hook that you will use all the time and is one of the most important React hooks. So the way this hook works is it lets you add a state variable to your component. Same thing as adding a variable, but the difference is this variable is now controlled by React. So you can say state, set state equals useState, and then you set an initial state. Okay, I encourage you to go through this documentation page. This is useState within React's documentation. But the way we use this is we've got the variable itself, which is should set show search, and then the setter of this, which is going to be set. And then I just need to call this to be the setter function with the value that I want to set. Okay, so what I want to do is that when I click on this, I want to set should show search to be true. So going back to my thing, if I click on this, I should see my input field. Awesome. And that is how you create a state variable using useState hook. One of the most important hooks in React. Now here's a homework for you. As of now, when you click on this should show on this button, on the search field, you can see the search. But I want to dismiss this when I click away. So if I click somewhere else, somewhere here, I want to dismiss this search. I want to toggle it to off. How can we do that? The hint for you is we're using onClick to set it to true. What can we use to dismiss that when I am not on this header, when I'm focused away? So solve that. That is your homework for this segment. Now let's implement the search functionality. So what I want is that when the user starts typing in this field, I actually capture the input that they're typing, and then I use this to search for movies. In order to do that, there is a handy method on input called onChange. And I'm going to add a new method here called handle search change. Handle search query change. And now I'm going to create this function handle search query change, where I captured the query from what the user has typed and just update. And I'm just going to console log that for now. Okay. I'm also going to clean this up and move this up here. Placeholder equals search, handle search query change, on change, class name, and then I'm going to move this down here. Okay, much easier to see now. Now if I console log, console this, and then if I type something, cool. You'll see as soon as I type something and change the query, I do see it in the output over here at the bottom. Nice. Okay, cool. Now what I want is that as I have updated this query, I want to be able to fetch the movie. And you'll notice on Netflix that as soon as I type, it actually updates for the movie, right? So if I look for like test and type, even if I don't hit enter, it actually already searches for movie. So we're going to do that. I did notice that my style is a little bit different from Netflix's style. So we'll update that in a second. No problem. Okay, so let's do that. Now, as we click enter or as we stop typing, I want to be able to look for that movie. So what does that mean? What does the on typing, stop typing mean? That is actually another event handler called on key up. which basically waits for the user to continue typing and then stop typing in order to search something. What I want to do is that as the user is typing, I also want to start searching. So basically in onChange, when the user has typed something, I've got the query in here. I also want to start the search, which is search for query, the query that I just sent. Now I don't have this function search query, so we're going to create that function. Before I move forward, let's format our code, format document, prettier, cool. Okay, all right, so let's implement search query function. This is going to be a fun one, all right? This is actually where we implement search. So how do we search for queries? Remember, I have my movie data that I have imported from movie data that I have in app. I think it's in MovieList or it's an app trending now, okay? I do have this. So export and remember I have this movie data, which is where I was searching, which is how I'm populating this, okay? And this is still a mock data. So let's actually move this out into a new file because we're going to import this file into, we're going to import this movie data, this mock data into our components. So I'm going to create a new file within source called mockdata.json. And then I'm going to put this in here. This is my JSON file. What's my mock data? Okay. And then I can remove this because this is a JSON object. And then I'm going to format document. Oh, this is not a valid JSON because everything needs to be a string. So let's go ahead and make this a valid JSON using the magic of ChatGPT. Convert this into valid JSON. There we go. Here's your converted JSON. Thank you very much. Continue writing. Okay, I have a valid JSON. I'm going to place that in here. And now I've got mockdata.json. Same values as before, just moved away into a new file. So now we're going to say import movie data from this. This is actually mockdata.json. And we should also move it into a new folder called data. Let's move it into a new folder, data, and I'm going to move this guy in here. Oh, wait. Whoops, not a file. Not a file, but a folder. Okay, source, folder, data, mock data. Move. Get out the way. Okay, cool. Now, that's it. I've got mock data in here, and then I'm actually going to pull this mock data into my search bar as well. All right, nice. Whew. Oh wait, that's not even the one I was working on. Search bar. Cool. Okay, now I've got movie data, and when I search, what do I want to do? I actually want to search. In my search query function, I actually want to search for results in movie title, right? Filter movie. This is of type movie. Import type from types. Nice. That's what I need. Movie.title. Oh, title doesn't exist, huh? This is actually movie.name.to lowercase includes query.to lowercase, okay? And this is going to be movie data.results. All right, so let's see what we get back from results. All right, let's give this a shot. I'm going to close other tabs. Okay, let's give this a shot. So let's reload. All right, I've got nothing so far. And then if I click this and I say Wednesday, okay, I see that I've got a search query of Wednesday. And then I probably have the search coming through as well. Nice. See, I've got the name in here called Wednesday. Perfect. This is what I need. Okay, so in my search results, which is the results here, I do have the valid result. Correct. Good. But I also want to now show this data somewhere, right? Oh my God, look at the CSS so messed up. That's okay. We'll fix it in a second. But now I also want to show this Wednesday data somewhere. So if you notice in Netflix, we actually change everything that's on the page and just update it with the search results that we've got. So let's go ahead and do that. Now this is going to be really fun because now we will know how to update global state in the component. But before we do that, I have another homework for you. Now, you'll notice that in Netflix, if I type something like really fast, it doesn't just like search for it right away. Like if I say, let's say Wednesday, see, it takes a second to load it. And that is really important because otherwise you're gonna send so many queries to your server that it's gonna overload the server. So we're gonna need a way to actually wait for a second before we start searching. And that is called debouncing. It is a very important part of front-end applications where we make sure that we don't start firing as soon as the user is typing. We wait for a second before we actually start giving in results. I have a whole video on debouncing on my YouTube channel. It's called JavaScript Coding Interview Questions for Developers. It's actually one of the most important interview questions that you will get in an interview, both debouncing and throttling. And now I want you to practice debouncing. If you have never worked debouncing, watch this video, practice it, and implement it in here. So before we even start searching, we want to debounce this input and we want to only search after 500 milliseconds. So homework for you is to implement debounce functionality so that we actually start searching for a search query after 500 milliseconds. Good luck. Now, let's talk about why you would need state management and why you have to bring in libraries like Redux, Zustand at this point. As you can notice here, if we type something in the search field, we want like Wednesday. Now we have to send this data over, whatever search results come, into the rest of this app so that we can actually show results on this page, which means we're sending data from one component into other components. This is how we're going to pass state around. And in order to do that, we need some form of sending data around so that we're not just passing in through props. Because as you can imagine, in order to send data from the header, or rather search inside header into this home page and replace the content of hero in trending now, we need to be able to send data from an inside component of header into this main page. And in order to make this easier for us, there are better ways of sending data instead of just passing it through props. Now, there are multiple ways of managing state. One is by using context provider in React, which comes out of the box with React. Another way is by using reducers, also comes out of the box in React. There's also state management libraries like Redux that works really well for huge apps. And there's also lightweight state management libraries like Zustand that are kind of a combination of useState and Redux. I go into full detail of this in my course React Fundamentals at O'Reilly. So if you're interested in why and which state management to use and how to progressively update, check out this course. But for today, we're actually gonna introduce Zustand. I like Zustand a lot because it gives me the flexibility of calling in state management hook when I need to, and also keeps it easy and clean. So for an app like this, where I know that most of the data I'm going to be getting is going to be from APIs, and I may need to pass around some data, Zustand is the perfect approach. So installing Zustand is simple. You just got to do npm install Zustand. I've already gone ahead and installed Zustand. Wait, why is it here? I've already installed Zustand, and the first step in Zustand is to create a store. So let's go ahead and create a store. So I've created a store inside a new folder called store, and I'm going to call this search store. The way this works is very simple. So you've got the state variable, which is the query field. That's what the data the user is entering is going to be. Results, which is what we want to set after we have searched something. And then we have the setter functions, set query and set results, which is used to set these two variables. And then finally, we have the perform search function, which is what we had in search bar already. Interesting thing is that there is a function called set that merges state. So whatever you've got in state, it just puts that together. And that is the function we're going to use to update our query. And same with results. And then finally, we're going to use the perform search function to actually do the search. Then let's update our search bar. So we're going to bring in the store, use search store. And now when we actually search, instead of doing the search query here, we're just gonna call use search store dot perform search with the query that we just created. We should also update this query as well. So handle search query change gets. Okay, now that we have use search store in here, when we actually search for the query, we're just going to call the function perform search from use search store. When we get this function perform search, in the search query function, we just got to call use search query with the query that was passed in. And that's basically it. Oh, I don't know why I have these. Remove this. Okay. Now, if I open my console, I'm going to open perform search and console login there. Results, set results, console.log search results. And let's see if this works. Okay. Console, open my console, open this and write WED. And I should see Wednesday. I do see Wednesday. Awesome. Cool. Okay, so let's recap. So we got in Zustand as a package. Zustand is a state management library. And in order to use this, we actually need to create a store, search store. So we moved all of the functionality that we've been doing on perform search into the search store so that we can set the query, which is the query that the user has typed. And after we've done the search, which is the same thing that we were doing before, we just set the results back, which actually gives us the ability to view results on any page. And why we've done this is because now we're going to go to our app.tsx page and we're going to replace all of this with the search results. So we're going to call in, first of all, we're going to call it our search store, import, search store. We're going to call in our search store. And then we're going to get our function const results, use search store. And now in this main folder, and if results exists, then we want to show results. Otherwise, we want to show this stuff. And here we're going to actually just pass in results.map movie. And we're actually just going to create movie cards now. Movie card, key, movie card, that. And import movie card, not a type, import movie card from here. Movie is of type. Okay, let's see. Store, this is actually in here. All right, results.length greater than 0. Okay. All right, let's see. If everything works, as soon as we start typing, we should actually start seeing Wednesday in this. We should see only Wednesday. So if I type this, oh crap. I mean, it does work. I just removed too much. So we got to remove header up at the top. There we go. And now if I reload this, Wednesday. Okay, cool. Looks absolutely ugly, but it's working. Now let's try something else. This summer. Okay, I turned pretty. Okay, cool. That is working. I'm just gonna add this into a div and then add this in here, remove this from here, make this, make that. Okay, character, this is not valid. That is because we need a this, and then we need a this. Okay, and then this. Okay, cool. All right, this is still kind of ugly. Div class name. Oh, yes, please give me some class names. Okay, and then I'm gonna call this margin from top. Cool. Okay. Now if I add something else, it actually removes. And then if I WD and let's try this guy. Who's this? The badasses of Bollywood. Okay, Bollywood. All right, cool. It's working. You see that the results actually update when we start typing. And then if nothing matches, everything goes away, like results is empty. Good. That is what I expected. Cool. But there are obvious problems to this. So if I type in like WED, you'll notice that my home page, because it's a single page app, my home page content gets replaced with the search results. And this is not ideal. Ideally, I would have a separate page for search results. And that is where a router comes in. So let's talk about that. As you can probably understand, it's not ideal that when we add something to the page, we actually replace the existing content and then add something new. Now, if you look at apps like Netflix, when you look up something, it actually takes you to another route. Same with YouTube. When you open a video, it actually takes you to the unique URL of that video. Why this is also helpful from a user's perspective is that when you have a unique URL, you can share that with other people. From a code perspective, this is also helpful because it keeps your code organized and clean. And you also have the ability to store the state of URL params. So let's take a look at how to implement new URLs in React. Now, with the existing architecture that we have, we can only add content to the same page. But with the help of routing libraries like TanStack router and React router, we can actually add new routes. This works the same way in Next.js as well. If you're familiar with that, we're going to try out a TanStack router. Any form of router works the same way. If you learn one, you can easily understand other routers as well. We're going to use TanStack router because it's super easy to set up, very lightweight, and it is completely type safe. So let's get started. The first thing we need to do is installation. The first thing we need to do is install TanStack router. So let's go ahead and do that. There's also a faster way of setting up TanStack router, which is by using the script create TS router app. And you can have an app already set up with TS router. I'm going to do this manual process because I already have a file. I think I could do npx file router, my app. Instead of my app, I could just say this directory. Let's try this if this works. Yes, please install. That is fine. All right, npm run dev. Cannot find, oh yes, npm run dev. Nice. Okay, it has changed my port. And for that, I just got to go back into, what is the problem here? It's deprecated. Interesting. Package JSON, and I got to go change my dev port to, okay, let's do this again. Restart. Okay, 5175. That's because I already have this running here. So I'm going to restart this. 5173. Reload this. Oh no, it edited my app.jsx file. This is what happens, but it's okay. Okay. Route tree, CTA, JSON. I'll actually start from here. Okay, so now when you run this, you'll notice that it actually creates this index.tsx, that it creates this route/index.tsx file, and your content may look like it was overridden. Don't worry about it. Everything is still here. Now, if you go into this, you'll notice that TanStack router creates a new folder called /routes. And in there is this root file, which is where TanStack router boots up from. And then you have the other files that are actually where this index.ts, where this is coming from. So for us, don't worry about this. There is nothing changed. It just says that create file route. The default route here is the /homepage. That is your index page. So we're just going to get rid of this and import app from, because we already have this done. Perfect. And we also don't need this logo. So we're going to get rid of that and make sure that we actually remove it. Delete logo, move to trash. Cool. App.css. Oh, it changed all my app. Undo this. We don't need any updates in here. Cool. App logo spin. We don't need this. Wait, what was here before? Undo this. Undo this. App link. I don't think I need this either. Undo this. Undo this. Okay. Updated. Undid my app.css file because I don't need to update that. What else? app.tsx. There's no change here. App.css. Looks like there is no change here either. Good. What is the change here? Let's apply that back. It did undo some of these changes that I need, so I'm gonna bring them back in. tsconfig paths. We also need tsconfig path. We need these plugins, React, Tailwind, CSS. The reason I know why we need all this is because I've done this so many times. But if you're new to React, if you're new to Router, I would encourage you to actually start with. But if you're new to Router, I would encourage you to actually take a look at the code that you have to make sure that it doesn't remove anything that you need. We don't need this. Okay. Let me first format this. Format document. Cannot find Vite React. I actually don't know what Vite React is. Okay, I don't think I need Vite React because I have this React plugin. Okay, auto code splitting is true. We do need that. Okay, updated TanStack router here, added some plugins, and now this looks like it looks okay. So let's go ahead and try this. Let's go ahead and try installing this. npm run dev. Let's see. Okay, missing plugin. Let's go ahead and install this plugin. npm i-d, this one. Core, npm run dev. Okay, Tailwind CSS Vite. All right, npm id, this. Shoot, is that even gonna, crap, it's not gonna come through. Let's try this again. That npm id. Let's try this again. Okay, nice. What else? Run dev. What else? Cannot find Vite tsconfig paths. npm id config paths. Core. What else? I think that's probably it. Nice. Okay, cool. Wait, something else. The following dependencies are important but cannot be resolved. Zustand, Lucid, React, CLSX. Let's do a pnpm I. Are they installed? Yes, they are. Let's give it a run. Run Babel React compiler plugin. Okay. Oh, wait. We don't need compiler yet. Let's get rid of this. This is just me copying code from another file. Okay. Reload this. Can't resolve TW animate CSS. I actually do need that. Where is this TW animate CSS? Oh, I do need that, yes. pnpm id. All right, what else? Tailwind CSS? Are you kidding me? Okay. Okay, what else? Where is all of this coming from? App CSS? CLSX? Do I even have it? Tailwind CSS. Basically just resolving dependencies. Okay, npm id CLSX. Okay, I'm going to do this off camera. All right, after installing a lot of dependencies, now I'm ready. Cool. So I've got my my home page here. And then if you look here, there's like a little TanStack dev tools set up here as well. And this actually shows, this is a great way of showing that we've got a router set up. This only works in development environment. It's not in production. Okay, so now let's actually see what's going on and how can we add a new route. So remember when we wanted to search, we were actually searching we're actually replacing the content of the same page. We can put this in a new page. So let's go ahead and create a new page for search items. In order to create a new page, it's actually super simple. So we have this routes file, routes folder. This is where we define which routes are working. So we've got a new folder on index.tsx. You'll notice that we have this file route called /. We're just going to copy this and then we're going to create a new file here called search.tsx. Okay. And then here, see now, as soon as I typed search.tsx, it actually created this search for me this file route for me that says /search. And now if I go to localhost./search, it takes me to this search page, hello/search. Awesome. So I already have the search, on app.tsx, I actually have, I actually do this right here, which is if results.length is greater than 0, then actually start showing movie cards here, right? So I'm going to take this out, and this is going to go into my search file, my search component. And here I'm going to say, instead of route component, I'm going to call it search component, function search component. And then this is where I'm going to write, I'm going to return this. If results.length is greater than 0, then I want to return this. Otherwise, I want to return no results found. How about that? And then I'm going to return this. That's it. Okay, results is not defined, which is fine because this needs to come to the search component. Okay, just to make sure that my page is working fine and that my my app route is working fine, let's actually import movie data. Movie data, what was it called? Movie underscore data. Okay, so we're going to import movie data, and instead of rendering results, let's actually render from movie data. We're going to make sure that our route is actually loading properly. Also want to import movie card. Nice. And then types. Okay. And then what does this say? Okay. Okay. Now, if I've done this well, this should work. Hold on. No results found. Movie data.length. Movie data.results.length. Right? Movie data.map is not a function. Hold on. Movie data.results.map. Now let me see. Cool. Okay, awesome. So I've got my route working properly. And if I show you here, this is actually the /search route, which is what I want it to be. Now, one thing you'll notice is that on this route, we actually don't have the header. Why is that? This is where how TanStack router sets up the app. Now, if you look at root.tsx, you'll notice that we've got this outlet here. Outlet basically means that all of the components that should go within that route's children, it's like all of the children of that route go in that. And then we've got the TanStack dev tools in here. So I just need to call my header in here. So that header comes on every page. I'm just going to call it import header from this. And now I've got header on every page. So let's also make sure that our index page is working correctly. So if I go back to index, oh, it's not working correctly. What's the problem? The character, this is not a valid element. I think something probably broke. So I go back to app.tsx. I actually don't need this header in here. And oh yeah, we were doing this check. We don't need to do that check anymore. So we've got app main.tsx, and that's basically it. Okay. And I actually don't need to do this search anymore on the app page as well. I'll show you where we're going to do that in just 1 second, but we're going to clean up our app file now. So now our app file is much cleaner. We still have this search functionality here. If I type, it should do something. We're going to implement that in 1 second, but I have this much cleaner app file. And now if I go to my /search, I actually have the search file as well, where I am rendering a bunch of movies. So now let's update the functionality so that when I type something, I'm taken to the search page, which is how Netflix does search as well. So let's take a look. Okay, so now if in Netflix I search for like Wednesday, you'll notice that I'm taken to Wednesday, like I'm taken to a page that shows Wednesday and other movies. And then on the top, I have this search parameter called search q equals Wednes, like whatever that search type is. So what's happening is that you're typing in the input field. This data is going to the route, and then the route then updates based on the search results of whatever is in the URL parameter, which right now is WED. So that's how this is working. Again, you type in the input field that updates the route URL parameter. You still have /search, but your URL parameter is changed. And based on that, your data on the page is changed as well. This is super important to remember because this will help us understand how to use TanStack router and how to fetch data at what point and where. So we're going to take a look at something called search params in TanStack router. And what this helps us do is that if there is anything that follows a path like /search with with a with the URL param like movie equals Wednesday, it will be able to capture this parameters, and we can use this in our component. That's what URL search params does. And to do this is actually super easy in a component. We have something called a use search hook, and we can get whatever keywords are passed in or whatever parameters are passed in by using the use search hook. So let's go ahead and add this in our search component. We're going to create a new parameter here called movie. So we're going to say /const movie equals use search. And now when somebody types in a movie like Wednesday and I hit search, I should be able to see that in my console. Nice. I've got search query Wednesday here. So this is how I can capture what the user is typing in here. Okay, now let's go ahead and implement this. How are we going to search here? Now, if we actually search for a movie like Wednesday, I actually get it in the console here, Wednesday. Cool. Which means that I'm able to pick up a search parameter from the URL route. Now, what I need to do is that if I type in this field like Wednesday, I should be able to get that on this page, right? How do we do that? Now, if you remember, this component search bar already calls perform search. So we had created this Zustand. We had created our perform search in our store, in our Zustand store perform search. And when we type in the search query, handle search query change, we're already calling in perform search, which means that we can read the results like we were doing before from Zustand store, and we don't need to, and that's all we need to do. So if I look at my search, if I call in my, which basically means that if I call in my store here, import, use search store from store, and then I call in const results equals use search store state.results. And now if I log those results, and I'm going to update movie data and get rid of movie data and actually bring it back to results. Now, let's get rid of this. And now if I type, I should be able to perform the search and read those data and read the updated results on this /search page. So now if I type WED and, oh, I have to reload this page. Okay, says no results found. But if I say WED, cool. I do see that it has been updated to Wednesday. So that means my search bar, which is where I'm performing the search, and the actual route is now getting hooked up. However, there's still a problem here. When I type WED, or let's actually type a different movie. Let's say Nobody. Oh, that movie is not popular anymore. This one, The Summer I Turned Pretty. Oh, because these are shows. Okay. All right. So now if I go to /search page, and then if I look for The Summer, okay. The search page is getting updated based on what I'm typing in the type box here, in the search box here. However, the URL route is not getting updated. That is your homework now. Find a way so that when we actually type something in here, we're taken to the correct route in here. And I'll give you a hint. You want to look for a way to navigate to a route when an action is performed. If everything works well, as you type in here, The Summer, this data should start popping up in here as well, and this URL should update. That's your homework. If you have a question, put it in Discord. If you don't understand what we just did, put it in Discord as well, and I will answer your question. But this is how to implement a new route with TanStack router and how to accept URL params in TanStack router. The way we did search params is the same way we can do path params. So for example, if I had a movie route like movie/ID, this is the same way to do. There is another hook for this called use params, I think, use params. And the way we do search params is the same way we do path params as well. So once you understand search params, you can also do path params. So now you know how to add new routes in your app. Now remember this movie data that we've been looking at? It's actually the mock data, right? We never actually called the real API. So let's go ahead and do that. First, let's get rid of this movie data from here. And also I'm going to get rid of the movie data object, a movie data file. Make sure you clean up your files as soon as you're done with them. Okay, before we learn how to call an API, we're going to take a look at useEffect hook. This is a very handy hook that lets you synchronize a component with an external system. What does external system mean? External system is anything that is outside of the scope of React. It could be a database, it could be an API, it could be DOM, it could be a web API like set timeouts. And in order to synchronize with them, which is to get data from it or to have access to it, we can use useEffect hook. One thing that I want you to read from this documentation is that effects let you specify side effects that are caused by rendering itself rather than a particular event. So, for example, if you click on something and something else must happen, that is a click handler. That is not a side effect. A side effect is something that should happen no matter which interaction caused the component to appear. So for example, setting up a server connection is an effect because it should happen no matter which interaction caused the effect to appear. One thing to remember about effects is that they run at the end of a commit after the screen updates. And this is basically after everything is done, React will run effects to make sure that anything that needs to be synchronized has been synchronized. This is a good time to synchronize the React components with some external system like network or a third-party library. I also highly recommend that you read this section on you might not need an effect. Effects are easily one of the most commonly abused React hook and can cause a lot of re-rendering in your React app and waste performance. And slow down your app. So I have made a whole video on React useEffect. It's just a 5-minute video, so go ahead and watch that. And there's also an article that I can recommend you by Dan Abramoff, which is a complete guide to useEffect. These two resources are not an optional read, they are a mandatory read. So go ahead and read that before you start using useEffect. Okay, with that, let's go ahead and start adding useEffect to our app. I will also open my API endpoint, which is where I'm going to get my movies. And the endpoint that I'm going to be fetching is this one, api.themoviedb.org /movie/popular languages is English. That's the one I'm going to get. Where am I going to get that? I'm going to get this in my component trending now. And now I'm going to create a hook here called useEffect. This array here is extremely important. This is the dependency array, which basically means that this determines how often and when useEffect runs. If this is empty, it means that this will run once per every render. If this is not present, it runs every time React re-renders. And if this has something like movie, this will rerun every time movie.id changes. So this dependency array is extremely important. So let's go ahead and create a function here called const fetch trending movies. IntelliSense has helped me get this already done. Something that I want to remind you is environment variables. You can see here that I'm actually importing this Vite TMDB auth token from my end file, which is something I'll create now. So I'm going to go ahead and create a .env file. And this is where I'm going to put this token. So TMDB, what is it called? TMDB Vite. Vite TMDB token. And this is where I'm going to put my token, whatever that's going to be. I'll get this token from my TMDB API itself. And then the next thing you must do is to add this env file in your git ignore. And this will just make sure that your environment variables don't get leaked out to the public on GitHub. So remember to put all of your environment variables in a .env or .env local file and add it to git ignore. So now that I have that, I'm going to get my token in here. And this is going to be token. Okay, now that I have that, it's just a simple fetch call. I'm going to fetch this API trending, is that the one? Trending, this is the one I need. HTTP, provide in my API key. And let me make sure this is correct. I'm actually going to add this API URL in here and then clean this up by adding API URL with API key of this. Okay, API URL, and then I'm going to pass in the authorization token, which is the token that I have coming from Vite, from my environment variables. And now IntelliSense was automatically able to add a try catch block, which is something that is very important. So if anything goes wrong with this fetch function, I am going to throw a catch. I'm going to throw an error, and I'm going to capture that in here. Now, in order to update this, I'm going to create local state variables here called const results, or actually let's call it movies. Set movies as, what is this? useState, and then set it to null, empty. And then same way, I also need error, useState null. Okay. Now, if there is an error, I'm actually going to set an error, fail to fetch trending movies. And then if there is no error, I'm going to set this data to be set movies to be data.results. And now here, I just got to get movies.length, and this will be movies. Also, if there is an error, what do I want to do? Now the search store says that I have to, because I remove movie data, the search store says that I also need some movie data, which is fine, because in my useEffect, I can actually update my store here as well. Set error null, and then I'm going to set, and then we also want to get use search store, which is our store, and get set results from there and update that set results from data.results, because we had also hard-coded that value. So one useEffect is updating so many other things. It's calling an API, it's setting results in the search store, so much happening. If I've done everything right, my movies should actually be fetching from the latest movies, which it looks like it did update to the latest movies. These are now movies and not shows. So this is working fine. Let's also check to make sure. Something that we should add is a loading state. So I'm going to create a const loading, set loading, useState true. And when I'm actually fetching the movies, I'm going to try and set loading to be true. And then when I'm done fetching the movies, I'm going to set loading to be false. And also, if something wrong happens, I'm also going to set loading to be false. So let's see. We're going to go ahead and add a loader as well. Loading, and set loading to be loading. Otherwise, if we have movies.length, actually, I'm going to move this guy. Hold on. I'm going to move this guy in here. And then I don't need to actually, movies.length is this, and then this div goes inside here. And probably, hold on, this goes here, this goes here. So let's now test this to make sure that this runs. So now if I give this a hard reload, actually it's not showing me the loading component. That is because it probably is super fast. So I'm going to slow this down, slow 4G. Let me go to a 3G connection, and let's give it a reload. Okay, now I'm reloading my app. It's probably going to be super slow because I'm actually fetching movies from an external API. It's also important to keep checking your app with the slow connection to make sure how your app is responding for people who are not using fast internet. So this is a good test to do. So let's make sure that we actually get loading. Let's disable cache, and now let's reload. And then instead of 3G, let's do slow 4G because 3G was way too slow. Let's reload this. Now, when I disable cache, actually what browser does is it actually refetches the data instead of using whatever was in the cache. So hopefully I see loading now. Okay, so I see trending now. I saw something. I think I saw no movies or something. No movies were found, which is fine. I'm going to get rid of this. So I actually see a div loading. I don't want to see no movies were found. I want to see a loading screen. So let's go ahead and do this again. All right, so it does say loading, and then it has a little flicker, and then it starts loading in the content. Good, that's what I expect. So now loading screen is working properly. And if I break something with my API, I should also get an error screen. So let's test that as well. I'm actually going to not pass in the token. And let's see if this actually gives me an error. Oh, crap. Okay. Undo. I'm gonna write token to be null. Why not? Okay. And now if I give like a zoop, like a reload, bro, reload, disable cache and reload. Okay. Network reload. Raise your hand if you're tired already. Raise your hand. Raise your hand. I'm tired. Okay, so I do see cannot read properties of undefined, reading map. Ooh, this is the great test. Okay, this is where I want to talk about error boundaries now. Now, see, if you look at your console, here you'll see an error that says the following error wasn't caught by any route. At the very least, consider setting an error component in your route. This is extremely important in React because it's possible that you have some error happening and then your entire app will crash. So let's go ahead and add an error component. And I believe TanStack router also has a way of adding error component and a not found route. So we're going to go ahead and add both of those. All right, the error component is a component that renders, wow, how many times can you say component? The error component is a component that renders an error message and upstream the error's message. So in order to set this up, okay, how do I error component? How do I error component? I'm hoping one of these examples has a TanStack route, create router. Okay, you know what? Let's try this. I think I know what I can do. Okay, let's do this. In our root file, I'm going to check. There is a component thing here, right? So what if, oh, there you go. There's an error component here that says app error. And then I think this accepts an error. And then I can say error. Something wrong. Let's try this. Something wrong happened. Message. Nice. Okay. There's also a not found component, and I'm going to add that as well, which says for a poor page not found. That's good enough. Now, if I reload my app, give it a droop. Cool. It says something wrong happened, cannot read properties of undefined, reading map. Let's make it a little pretty where I can add a header in here. So instead of this div, then I'm going to give it a class name of component. I really don't need to spend too much time working on this right now, but I just want you to know that you have the ability to make your app much more robust by doing this way. Okay, header. Where am I? Div, class name, container, header. Okay, reload. Oh my goodness. I gotta do a this, and then I gotta do a doop doop, and then I gotta doop, and then I gotta do a doop doop. And then I gotta do a oops. Okay, again. Header. You know, my brain is giving up and this is telling me that it's time to pause this out of here, get this out of here, reload this. Class name equals container, and then I'm gonna get this. And then this becomes a div. Okay, you know what? I don't have time for this. I'm gonna do this later. Famous last words. Cool. Okay, whatever. Something wrong happened. I just put the error message in here. I can make this pretty later. But this is how we can create an error component. And now our app will look much better and it won't just like crazily drop something on us. Okay, so now if I go back, localhost, what was the problem? Oh yeah, I had to go ahead and put this token back in. There we go. Nice. Ooh, why does it say no results found? Okay, why am I still on this? 5173, neat. Okay, now now I still have movies coming in. Nice. And let's also check if my search route is working. So if I go to /search, okay, it says no results found. That is fine. I do have to fix this so that no results found actually goes underneath this React Flex. Some absolute positioning bug in here. I'm going to fix that in 1 second. But let's see if we have a movie. Nobody. Ooh, I know. It's actually returning no results found because it's looking up in results, which if we haven't actually fetched movies yet, or in this case, updated results, it would be empty. So that basically means that nobody was setting results. And now that I'm looking at the store, I also see that perform search actually shouldn't be a function of the store itself. This is a library utility. So let's get rid of perform search. We don't need to keep this in here. Get rid of perform search from here. And I'm going to add perform search as a new library utility. Okay, so I've created a new file called performsearch.ts. This is actually within the library folder, performsearch.ts. And this is where I'm going to move the searching operation. Okay, one more thing. I need somebody to actually set that data, set those results when this data is fetched on app page, right? So there's one more thing I'm going to do. On the home page is where I have the trending now component. Trending now is actually where we need that data. When thinking about how data flows from the app, an important thing to remember about sharing data, if there's multiple components sharing the same data, you need to lift that data up into a common parent, okay? So in this case, that common component is going to be app.tsx. And now at this point, we can fetch data when the app renders, and then we can send this data over to this trending now component as movies equals movies, or like trending movies equals movies, something like that. So we just got to get movies now. Before you go ahead and add a useEffect here and move your API here, there's something else I want to talk about, and that is creating a custom hook. Now you have already seen that we need this data, this popular movies in multiple places in this app. Instead of copy pasting fetch everywhere in this app, we could extract this out into a custom hook. Let's create that hook called usePopularMovies.ts. This also goes in the library folder. And here, basically, I'm going to copy the stuff that I was doing earlier with fetching the movie. And now here, I'm going to move the logic of fetching popular movies. And this is really cool because this hook will now return movies, error, and loading. And in my app.tsx, I just need to call this hook now. It's like any other hook. So I could just say const movies, error, loading, use popular movies. And then I can just say if loading, return loading, like loading component, error, then return error component. If no movies, then return no movies. Otherwise, pass the movies down to the trending now component. And then I got to make sure that I import this. Okay, what's the problem here? Use movies, return movies, error, loading. And now all we got to do is get the movies error loading from use popular movies, pass that down to trending movies. Let's also update trending movies. So we're actually calling in, let's remove all of this from here. We don't need any of this. And now this component is much cleaner. Nice. What's the problem? Trending movies. Oh, okay. Yeah, this is fine. Movies is fine. We don't even have to make it crazy. Alrighty. All right. So that looks good. We've got trending movies here. Nice. Now let's also go back and fix our search. The reason why search wasn't working is because our results was empty, right? So let's go ahead and do that. Now in the use popular movies thing, that is when we actually first fetch movies, and then we set our movies thing to here. And this is the movies that we returned, right? This is when we fetch for trending movies. Now what we can do is when we actually set movies here and when we return those movies, we can also update our store at the same time. So I'm going to import my store, import use search store, and then I'm going to call const set base movies function. This is a new function I just created where I'm going to set base movies for this, and I'm going to update data.results here. And now what this allows me to do is that when I'm searching, it can actually search from the base movies function. So let's go ahead and update perform search. In perform search, I've got query coming in and results coming in, and I'm going to make sure that my search bar component calls perform search query matching titles, yes, and calls base movies. So does not exist on source state. Okay, let's fix this. But I've updated this component to reflect that base movies comes from search store, and this base movies is set when I actually call trending now. Okay, So let's go ahead and update this type. Base movies is not found, so that's fine. Base movies and set base movies and base movies and set base movies. And I don't think I need set results anywhere. Const set results, use set store matching titles dot data. Ah, yes, that's actually how I set the queries. Okay, what's the problem now? Base movies is undefined. Undefined is not assignable to okay, right. So basically the problem is that it's thinking that base movies cannot be undefined. Let's fix these types. So, oh, where does set base movies come from? Oh, you said store state dot set base movies. Okay, let's make sure that our search is working properly. So if I go to, oh my God, why does it keep doing this? Okay, so now I'm going to go to my search page and I see no results found at the top, which is fine. I don't care about that yet. And then if I look for this, and I'm going to open my console as well. And if I say NOB, oh, what's the problem? Search results from store NOB. Okay, it's probably not hooked up yet. Search bar, base movies. Okay, let's do a quick test on the search component to make sure that we are seeing movies. So if I check for NOB, I should see nobody, and I see nobody too. Awesome. So the search functionality is now hooked up with Zustand store. And when we fetch this app, we are automatically populating the Zustand store so that movies actually gets set. And then when we are fetching and when we are doing a search, we're searching from the same store. Now, before we go any further, let's go ahead and clean the store. So you notice that I actually added. So if you notice, we have a single store so far where we are also, which is called search store, which has results of the query, the searching that we are doing, and also the base movies. Now this base movie stuff is not related to search store. It's not related to searching. So let's create a new store for this. So we're going to call it moviestore.ts, and I'm going to move, close, so many files. Okay, I'm going to move these two base movies and results into a new store. So let's go ahead and create a new store. So I'm going to create search state, use search store, and then I'm going to create this guy in here, and none of the stuff is going to be here. All right, types useState equals this. Actually, a better name might be base movie store. All right, and now in app.tsx, I think that's where I was fetching movies. Use popular movies. In use popular movies, I'm going to update this to be use base. Hold on, let's import this again. Import use base movie store from movie store. And now this is gonna be use base movie store. Nice. And I believe search was doing the same thing. Search bar. Use search store state.base movies. For this, we're gonna get import use base movie store, and we're gonna get this from this state.base movies set results. This goes in the search store, which is fine. We can get rid of this, get rid of this. Good. And now we should have 3 stores. We should have 2 stores in my store folder, which is store. I've got movie store and search store. Nice. Okay, much cleaner now. And if I check to make sure that my app is still running, I'm gonna give it a reload. I still have my movies here. Good. And I'm gonna make sure that I am seeing some search items in here. So I'm going to type nobody. Oh, hold on. Nobody. Somebody. Nobody? Ugh, okay. Broke something, of course. Oh, right. I was having this. I removed that. And then I gotta have nobody. Nobody, nobody, nobody. Oh, there you go. Cool. It's still coming through. Perfect. So far, what did we do? We removed our useEffects. We removed our mock data, actually. We added a useEffect. We were fetching our API and putting that data into our Zustand store. Then we removed the useEffect and moved it into a custom hook, which is where we were fetching our API again. And then we put all of that data into a new search store so that when we were searching, we were only setting in the query and the results. And then for actual movies itself, we set a new store called Movie Store. Now, here's your homework. We have a lot of work going on in search bar component. And remember the principle, which is your component should be as light as possible and as dumb as possible, which means they should not be the ones doing stuff like setting results, base movies, things like that. Remember, custom hooks always start with use keyword. So create a new hook called use search movies, and you gotta use that hook to actually search for movies. Good luck. Before we move further with our app, it's important to make sure that as we progress through our app, we're also taking care of the quality of the app and the accessibility of the app. So let's go ahead and test if this app is accessible for people who are using assistive technologies such as keyboard and screen reader. The first step in making sure that an app is accessible is to ensure that it is keyboard accessible, which means by only using your keyboard, you want to navigate through every section of the site, and you want to make sure that every section is accessible. We're going to use our keyboard to navigate through the app. And if you look at this app, what are some main features you can think of? We have this component here that searches. So we want to be able to navigate to the search component. Then we have this CTA here that takes a person to restart their membership. Definitely want to be able to navigate to that. And then finally, we have a trending now component here, which is where we want to see or browse different movies. And we want to be able to scroll through these movies. Use your keyboard now and navigate through this app by using the tab key. So I want to hit tab first and let's see where my focus lands. I hit tab. Okay, now you'll see that my focus has landed on restart your membership. You'll also notice that there is a white outline around it. Now, this is very important. If you have a component on the page that is focused, you want to make sure that at every point you know which component is focused. So every component that is focused must have a visible outline. In this case, we have this like whitish outline. That is good. However, you notice that I totally skipped the search functionality. So if I do Shift Tab, now I'm at the Shift functionality. But the first focus lands on the CTA, and that is a problem. We want to be able to first land on the header, which is the navigation, which is the search functionality. So we're going to note this and we're going to fix this. And now if I hit tab again, I am taken to the trending now component, but notice how all of them, the entire list is focused. I would rather, instead of focusing the entire list, I want to be able to focus only a single movie, which is the first movie. Those are two things that are wrong with this app currently. We're going to fix that in just a second. But before we even start fixing that, I want to show you another tool that is available at your disposal for helping with accessibility tests. Now, if you right click on your browser's console, you'll notice that there is an accessibility tab here. This tab has a toggle that says enable full page accessibility, reload DevTools, and then you'll see a little man here. So click on this man, and this shows you how this page looks like to somebody who's using a screen reader. What you want to focus here on is the text that each of these headings says. For example, at the top here, you'll see it says link, React focusable true. This actually takes the person to the home page, which is what we want. Button search focusable true, that is good. in the main content of the page, we've got the image hero background. Now this image actually has no relevance to the person who is using screen reader. Why? Because this image is not conveying any information to a person. Why? Because this image is purely decorative. It's not conveying any information to a person who may be using screen reader. So we want to make sure that we hide images like this from screen reader to avoid confusing people. Then we've got a heading here. It says unlimited movies, TV shows, and more. That's fine. And then we have a paragraph here, which actually has no text in here. So when we use screen reader, we want to make sure that the paragraph text gets announced. In order to use screen reader, you can actually go into on a Mac, you can open VoiceOver, turn this on.
VoiceOver on, speech off.
And now this will help you navigate this site using the screen reader. So we're going to start from the top. Oh, I have turned speech off. Okay. One thing you can do is open VoiceOver utility and make sure that speech is turned on. Speech. And uncheck mute.
Chrome.
Okay.
Visited. Leaving toolbar. Entering React crash course web content. Current page. Visited. Link. Heading level 1. React Flicks. Banner. Search button. UART. Restart your membership button. Main. List Demon Slayer. Kimetsu no Yaiba Infinity Castle The Fantastic Four. First Steps War of the Worlds Aztec Batman. Clash of Empires The Conjuring. Last Rites Nobody. Hero Back Desktop. Group. VoiceOver off.
Okay, you saw how when it was focused on the trending now, it actually started reciting all of these movies, like from here. Now that is a problem, right? Because if somebody wants to navigate through this component, this list component, they would be reading the entire thing. And that is a problem. However, in this video, I will not have the time to go through a detailed accessibility test. If that is something you want to see, let me know and I'll make a new video on accessibility testing. But there is one more tool that I want you to see, which is the Firefox browser's dev tools. Accessibility testing in Firefox browser is much nicer. Why? Because it actually tells me the issues that are present in this. So for example, here it says clickable elements must be focusable and should not have interactive semantics. This is helpful because this is helpful because now I can take a look at this document, this error, and see where this is coming from. So I noticed that this is actually coming from the main document itself, and that is not a problem. And hold on. And I noticed that this is actually a div app element, and this is not a problem. It's just saying this because it thinks that this app div should be focusable. So this is a bug that can be ignored. But what's also cool here is that I've got the show tabbing order here, and that actually shows me in which order the elements would be tabbed or keyboard focused. So you'll notice here. Oh wait, this is going bizarre. Hold on. Reload. Show tabbing order. Okay, so now I have my focus on tab. Then I hit tab, it goes to the search element and then the button and so on. So this is really cool because now it tells me in which order my elements are accessible or are tabbable in the order that the screen reader would see it. So to recap, the problems on this page from an accessibility standpoint are if I give this a tab, I also want to type in there. So if I hit space and I start typing NOB, you see I am now seeing the results. I also want to make sure that people who are reading from a screen reader can actually now see the updated results. So something that I could do here is add an ARIA live to this page, the search page, so that as the results are being updated, we also let people know that something is getting updated on the page. Another problem you remember is that this hero image actually has a alt text of hero background. And since this is a purely decorative image, we want to hide this from screen reader. And another problem is that the entire list is a tab stop. Instead, we want a single element or a single list item to have a tab stop. And I'll show you that in Netflix. So if I hit tab, you'll notice that I'm actually on a single movie item. And that's how we want it. So let's go ahead and fix this real quick. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is fix this alt tag on the hero image. Now, if we actually enter a blank alt tag, this tells the screen readers that this is a decorative image. So for this hero background, we can have a empty alt tag. Next, let's fix this cart component so that it is tabbable. Now, there's a few different ways of doing this. We could make this a button, this image itself as a button. We could add a row of button to this and give it a tab index of 0. But since we're going to be implementing on click for these movie cards, let's go ahead and make this a button. So we're going to say button, aria label, and buttons don't actually need a role or a tab index because they are by default interactive elements. Okay, and we also probably need on click. We're just going to console.log movie click, console.log movie clicked, and then the name of the movie. We'll implement this functionality in a bit, but now because we have a semantic button element, we don't actually need this tab index and the role and the aria label. This actually gets automatically added as part of the button element. Now, typically in a button element, let's say if you had like a text field here, for example, if you had something like click me, you would not need an aria label. But because for us, we actually have just an image object, we need the aria label. And in order to fix this, what we could do is we could actually add a movie.title here, and then we actually won't need the aria label itself. So whenever possible, use semantic elements such as button as opposed to adding a role of button and a tab index of 0. Why? Because semantic HTML elements give you accessibility out of the box and they work really well with screen readers. And finally, the last bug we found was on the search page. As we were adding search items, we were not able to announce that to the screen readers, so people would not know that there are new items being added or that we are actually filtering items based on what we're searching. So in order to do that, we can actually add a aria live attribute to these elements. However, if you imagine the user experience, when these items are added, we would announce what the movie would be, the title of the movie, whatever is in movie card. We could do aria live here, but we can do one step better, which is we only announce the information that is really important. Imagine if you're using screen reader, what is that is important on this page? I think it's important to hear how many elements are here or how many items return the movie title that you looked for, right? And if I know that there are movie titles, I can then go and browse that. So that is a better user experience than announcing everything as that gets outputted here. So let's go ahead and add a new element with an aria live of polite, aria atomic of true, which tells screen readers how much of this data it should announce, and a class name of SR only. Now this SR only is a Tailwind class that is used to remove an item from the visual page, but only screen readers will be able to see it. And this is helpful because now we can actually add something that is more informative for a person using, which is we can tell them that the movie that they searched for, we've got this many results for that movie. And now this is a much better experience for somebody using a screen reader. So let's go back in and retest this app. Now I'm going to use tab to actually see if I can get into trending now, and I can. Cool. I also see this nice outline on my items, which means that now I'm actually focused on this particular movie list. There is a slight CSS issue with this, but it's no big deal. I can fix that in a second. But now you see that I am now focusing on list items itself. And now if I go to this search component and I type the item, I will see that I don't have that box that I just added. But if I look in my accessibility settings, I do see here that it says 10 results for the word D. Okay, let's also test this real quick with the screen reader.
Desktop group. You are currently on a toolbar. To enter Chrome. Heading leave War of the Worlds, War of the Worlds. Search titles. People. Genres. P. 6 res P. You are currently on a E. 1 result pay. You are currently on a text field. E. P. O. B. O. D. Y. 1 res nobody. You are currently on a text field. To enter text in this field. Y. 1 results for nobody. You are currently on a text field. Voiceover off.
Okay. If you saw that, it said 1 result for nobody. Ooh, I found I found a bug. It says nobody two, nobody two. Let's go ahead and fix this in a second. But you saw that it actually said one result for nobody two, and I can't see that as a visual. I can't see that visually on the screen, and that is exactly how we should implement search functionality for screen reader users. Now let's quickly fix this bug of button to nobody. That nobody wants that. Where's that coming from? I think that's coming from here. Ooh, I know why that's the thing. That is so because I've already got an alt title and button will already pick it up from here. Cool. Okay. Now if I give this a sweep, oh, that was already fixed. Give it a reload. Nobody. Okay, there you go. Nobody two is fixed. Awesome. Cool. All right. So to recap, the three things that we fixed were we fixed alt tags and decorative images. We didn't need the hero decorative images, so we got rid of that for screen readers, and we added a screen reader only class for search bar search results count, and we added aria live equals polite, aria atomic equals true for that, and we also added the ability to tab through list items of movie cards using a button element in the list. And this ensures that each of those items are also tabbable. Now, this is not an extensive accessibility test. There is so much more we can do with this. For example, adding a skip to main content, improving the focus behavior within the movie cards list as well. Accessibility is not a one and done thing. But what I want you to remember is that when you build a component, make sure you do accessibility testing for it before moving on to the next component. And speaking of testing, let's also do unit testing and end-to-end testing for these components. But before we move on, here's a homework for you. I want you to use your screen reader, whichever one you have in your computer. Every computer comes with one. Go through these items, go through your app and see what do you experience and what are the problems you see with it. That is your homework. And I want you to put that in Discord. Let me know in Discord what problems you're seeing and how you attempt to solve them. So now let's do the job of actually testing our repo. You want to make sure that as you're writing components and hooks and any functionality, you're writing tests for them as well. So in React, the standard way of testing is with testing library, React testing library, and Vitest. So we're going to install these and set up our repo. And now in my package.json, there's also a new line here called test that basically tests with Vitest. I've also added a Vitest config here. So let's talk about what are the things that we want to test. If you look at our folder so far, we have a few custom hooks that we've written, like perform search, which is actually just a library function, which is actually a utility function, a use popular movies custom hook. We definitely want to write unit tests for these. We also have components here such as movie card, movie list, search bar. We want to write tests for any of this. What you don't want to write test for is anything in UI/card, because this is the card that we did not write. This comes from Shadcn. So we don't want to write tests for anything that is outside of our boundary. Same way, we do not want to test anything that comes from TanStack router itself, like create root route. We don't want to test any of the internals of a library. So let's go ahead and write our first test. Now I've already created a file here called perform search, and this is where I'm going to test my perform search functionality. So if you remember, let's open perform search on this side. Now, if you remember, perform search actually accepts a list of results and query. For a unit test, we do not want to test anything that is outside the boundary of this small unit. That's what makes it a unit test. For this component, for this function, results is a parameter it accepts and query is a parameter that it accepts. So for us, we're just going to pass it a mock list of movies. We're going to start with an edge case, which is returns empty array for empty query. In Vitest, you have to use test and expect to check for assertions. So let's go ahead and give this a run. We can test this by writing npm run test. And now it's testing this and it is passed. Nice. And now the question is, how many tests should we write? You want to test every single line of this code, right? So we've got q equals query trim lowercase. We're testing that here with insensitively. If no q, return data empty. That is what we're testing here. And then finally, const data equals results.filter title.toLowercase includes q. That's what is also being tested here. Let's run these. Okay, I'm going to add some more test cases in here to test multiple titles, search for no matches, and trim white spaces. And if I run this, these are also passing. Nice. Okay, so this is how to do a unit test. Now, we also want to test our components as well. So if I open movie card component, for example, or actually MovieList components, we also want to test that these components render properly. For that, we can use RTL, React Testing Library. React Testing Library is cool because it actually mimics the way a user would say. So let's go ahead and write a React test. Let's go ahead and write a test for testing our components as well. Now, where you keep your tests kind of depends from people. I like to keep all of my tests in a test folder. I've also seen where components itself would have a test for each of those components. But let's go ahead and write a test in the test folder. So now I'm going to create a file here called moviecard.test.t6. Okay, and now I'm going to use React testing library in here. Import movie card, and I'll also import the type. So now, see, it already asked me to import, create a mock movie, which is what I expect to do. I do not want to call an actual API within the test. All right, so let's render a movie card. In a test like this, what I want to check is if the card has been rendered properly. So what I want to do is I'll use the render function that comes from RTL, and I'll say render the movie card. And then I will check if the title element is correct. I will check if the image is rendered properly. And this is me doing functional testing of this component to make sure that the component has rendered properly. Okay, so I'm getting an error in here that says failed to resolve import UI card from source. So what I'm going to do is it's basically looking for this card component. Now, anything that is outside of this movie card thing or anything that I haven't created, I want to mock it. So let's go ahead and create a mock for this card. Okay, here is the mock card component. So now I'm just telling it that if you're looking for @components UI card, basically get this card. And it just returns a React element, just a simple div element, no big deal. Why I'm doing this is because I want to keep the boundary of testing focused on movie card. Movie card is the component that I created. So I want to make sure that anything else that is outside of movie card or anything that I didn't create is mocked out. And now my test passed. Basically, this is the essence of testing. You want to test anything that is you want to test anything that you wrote, and for anything that is outside of your scope that you didn't write, you want to mock it out or mock it away. Same thing goes for data that you fetch from API. Same thing goes for components that you're getting from an external library. You want to make sure that you're mocking all of those away. Now, homework for you. Every test for movie card component, your job is to write test for trending now component. You'll notice in this component, we are also accepting movies, and this further renders movie list. So your job is to write test for trending now. You want to mock away movies, and anything that movie list depends on that is not written by you, you want to mock those away as well. Good luck. Now let's take a look at Netflix site and see what we're missing. One of the most important features of any app is the authenticated experience and the ability for users to log in. If I click sign in here, I see that I can log in, and then I'll see the movies that I have watched, I am interested in, and I can also see a personalized list of movies. In the banner, I also have an ability to write my email address and get started or log in. Let's go ahead and implement this authentication feature. One of the easiest ways of adding authentication to a React app is by using Clerk, who are also sponsoring this segment of the video. What I love about this is that Clerk makes it super easy to add authentication, and it is as simple as setting up an npm install module and wrapping your code in a Clerk provider. So let's go ahead and set this up. Now, if I look at the documentation, the first step it says is create a React app. We already have that. Install Clerk and Clerk React. I'm going to go ahead and install that. I need Clerk API keys. So I will go and get this API key from the dashboard here. And then finally import the Clerk publishable key. Wrap your app in Clerk provider. What's cool about Clerk is that it's also available for other platforms as well, like for Next.js, for React Router, if that's what you're using, and for TanStack Start as well. So let's go ahead and do this. What's cool about this is that it comes with these handy components and you can have the sign-in experience and put anything you want in here. It also gives you some handy buttons like user button that gives you the ability to show a sign-in experience or ability to log in without having to implement it yourself. So let's go ahead and use this. Now, the first thing we need to do is get publishable key. I've already gotten that. And now I'm going to wrap my provider. And now I'm going to wrap my main.tsx file in this provider, which comes from Clerk provider. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to get Clerk provider from here. I probably don't have this installed. Let's go ahead and add this. Okay, let's go ahead and add this. And now all I need to do is wrap my app within Clerk provider. So I'm going to wrap this inside the query client provider. This is where my app goes, and I'm going to put this in here. Nice. And the publishable key comes from, I'm going to copy this as well. Publishable key comes from my n.local file. I have shown you that you got to create and publishable key comes from n file. And just a reminder that this file needs to go in your git ignore so that you're not sending your API keys to the public by mistake. So make sure that you've got .n in your git ignore. Okay, so I already have Vite Clerk publishable key set up in my n local, and I can just get it in here. And that's all that you need to do. Now your app is already wrapped with Clerk provider, and all you gotta do is create a header with Clerk components. So it actually gives you this handy sign-in button, and that's the one we're gonna use. So we have our header component, and in the header, we're gonna add a inside with my search bar. Actually, I'm going to create a new div here and then I'm going to import these buttons. I'm going to add all of this. So basically, if you're signed out, you will see the sign in button, but if you're signed in, you'll see the user button. That's how that works. Also going to add class names. We'll style this in a second, but let's see if this is working. So if I relog, there you go. I've got a sign in button, and if I click on it, it actually takes me to the Clerk auth page. And now if I go ahead and log in, once I have logged in, I will see my own avatar. Let's fix this style so it looks better than this. Okay, I'm going to add a flex item center, and I'm going to move the search bar before the auth experience. Okay, so give it a reload. Cool. I've got my search here and I've got my auth experience here, which is kind of similar to what Netflix has. We've got a sign in button and we've got, wait, where's my search? Oh, I guess you don't see search if you're logged in. Good thing. We should actually keep this within. And you'll see how easy it is to show search. And if I log out, actually, let's try this. If I sign out, you don't see search in here. Awesome. Okay, now here's the homework for you. In Netflix, you have an email address here, and this is basically a login experience. So they want you to write their email address and then get started. Your homework is to implement that here so that if you're logged in, you don't see this banner. But if you're not logged in, you see an email field here. Extend the hero component so that you see an email field here. And when you click on that, it takes you to login experience, just like how you do in sign-in. And you can use this link on the screen to sign into Clerk. This just tells Clerk that you came to their app through me, and it helps to keep supporting this channel. So implement a login field and let me know how that goes. Again, if you have any questions, you can put them in Discord. I will be there to answer your questions. So that is an auth experience. If you've been following along with me, you would have an app that looks something like this as of now. Maybe a little bit better, maybe a little bit worse, but we probably have something similar. Now, one thing that you'll notice is that if I search for something in the search bar and I say nobody, I see an item. But see what happens if I give it a reload and then I look for nobody. It doesn't work. And why doesn't it work? I'll show you why. The problem is that in our search component, we're actually searching the Zustand store to search for movie results. And that Zustand store depends on this trending now component being called. And once you reload, that trending now component is not called on this search component page. Therefore, there is nothing in the store when you give it a reload. That is the problem with client-side state management. Because it depends on which routes are being called, we gotta make sure that search component always has access to movies. In order to do that, we can actually use something that we already have in our repo, which is TanStack router. Now, this is a really cool thing about router that I want you to know. You'll notice that we're already using route here and we've already set up a component here. Router actually provides us an ability to add a loader function, which is basically a place where you can perform any data fetching here if needed, like IntelliSense says. But what's really cool about this is that this loader will run whenever this route is ready to be loaded, which means as soon as I start typing, this loader will run. So now in this loader function, I'm going to put my API fetch call that I was doing in the useEffect. So that's all I've done. I've just moved the API call in here. My fetch is here. And I'm returning a base movies object that has the data that I fetched from the API. And now when this route is loaded, the router is going to do the job of calling the loader already so that we have base movies with us when we land on this /search route. And now in order to just use this, so now all I got to do is call the router use loader data, and that will call this loader function. I'm going to get this base movies from here. And now instead of using results from the Zustand store, I can simply perform search on this data. Okay, let's give it a shot. Let's see if this works. Now if I start typing NOB, I still see it, cool. But now if I reload and I say NOB, this still works. Awesome. And that is because on this route, on the /search route right here, I'm actually fetching data from the API, and I have this ready and accessible to me anytime I want to start using the search functionality. And this is why TanStack router is extremely popular, because it's not just to create new routes, but it can also do extra stuff like pre-rendering data for you, caching this data to avoid extra API calls. Something that I want you to remember is that in production apps, the standard way of fetching an API is through TanStack query. TanStack query is a dedicated library that is used for data fetching and provides options such as fetching, caching, and also gives things like is pending, error, loading out of the box. This makes it a lot easier to fetch an API and also know when it is fetching, so you can use is pending and error. One of the best ways of using TanStack query is for infinite scroll queries and load more functionalities. And you can imagine in an app like Netflix, where we have tons of movies that we want to load and perhaps have infinite scrolling capabilities, a library like TanStack query is extremely helpful. To use TanStack query, I've created a new library here called Use Infinite Movies. And here I'm basically going to add my fetch movies function that I was using so far. I just want to make sure that the API actually supports pagination, which in our case, we're going to append a page and that supports pagination. In order to have infinite movies, we can actually use a function from TanStack query called Use Infinite Query. We provide a query key. This can be any unique value. We provide a query function. This is what tells TanStack query what to do when it's fetching the data. So this is basically where your fetch movies comes in. And the final thing to provide is get next page param. This is how TanStack query knows what is the next page to fetch. And you can also pass it an initial page param, which means start from the first page. Your homework is to implement infinite scroll by using use infinite movies function that I have provided. I'll give you a hint. You want to use intersection observer API to implement infinite scrolling of the website, where more and more content is loaded and rendered as you scroll. Infinite scrolling is a prime example of intersection observer. Basically, the idea is that you understand where you are on the page using intersection observer. You provide a callback, which is how you tell intersection observer to fetch more data, which is where use infinite queries is going to come in. And then you provided other options such as what is the threshold where you should fetch, things like that. So I've given you 2 hints, and now your job is to basically combine both of them, use intersection observer and use infinite query to fetch infinite movies. To implement an infinite scroll. On the homepage, once you're logged in, you can fetch multiple movies. Basically, that means your trending now component will render multiple movies. So this will actually test your ability to implement auth, have a signed in experience, and reuse existing cards and components that you've made to fetch infinite queries. Good luck. Now, if you've been following this app so far and understood everything that we've done, this next step is going to be super simple for you. You notice that when we click on these movie cards, we actually don't do anything. That's because we haven't actually implemented the on-click functionality of these buttons. So here is the homework for you. Implement a new route so that when I click on a movie, it opens up in a new page and starts playing the movie. Just like how you do in Netflix, where you click on a movie, it starts playing the movie. This is a full page video player component. That's what you're going to implement. If you look at the URL here, you'll notice that it is actually a new page. It says /watch/ whatever this means to them. So that's what you're going to implement. You're going to implement a /watch page, which actually is a video player component that should work when you click this movie. And where you're going to get the videos, I will leave the links to some sample videos that you can use to create a video player component. Now, what this video player component should do? So to recap, this video player component should open a new page when a movie is clicked. You're going to use TanStack router for that. You should be able to play a movie. For this, you're going to create a new component called video player. And it should be accessible, which is you should be able to use keyboard to play the movie, pause the movie, and go back. Now, to give you a hint, you can use the video element. And this element is available to you out of HTML itself. It's just like image. Implement this component and let me know how it goes. Again, if you have questions, put it in Discord. I want to see what are the features that you implement and which libraries are you going to use. Before we deploy this application, it is important to ensure that this application is performant. Now, on a fast computer, things will look super fast. But in order to make sure that this works on slower networks as well, we should check the performance of this by navigating to the Performance tab. Wow, look at that. And enabling throttling in the Network tab. So I'm going to enable slow 4G. I also like to disable cache when I'm testing performance to ensure that my data is not already cached, that the browser is not actually caching any images or data. So this actually gives an accurate estimation of what the app will look like on a slow computer on the first load. Okay, slow 4G and disable cache is what we're going to do. And now let's go ahead and go to performance and click on reload. Now this will show you the way this loads will show you how your app will load on a slow computer. So you'll see that 10 seconds have elapsed and my app is still blank. This is obviously a big problem. On the 19th second, something starts showing up. I've got some content loading. Okay, so at 24 seconds, everything is loaded. Now, I want you to take a look at these metrics, the LCP, INP, and CLS. So this tells us that at 24 seconds is when the largest contentful paint, which is the largest object that appears to the user, shows up. And now if you scroll into this graph, you'll notice that at 24 seconds-ish is when things have loaded. So this is at 24 all the way to the right. You'll notice at 24-ish seconds, or 25 actually, we see a loading screen and then data starts loading. And why does it take that long? Actually, LCP breakdown is a really good way of finding out how long it took for the elements to render. Here it shows us it took 24 seconds for the element to render. Time to first byte, which is when did the first byte arrive on client side, was 8 milliseconds. So basically, from the time it took the first byte to arrive to the time that the entire app is ready, it took 24 minus 8, what is that? 16 seconds. Wow, fast. Wait, no. No, it's 8 milliseconds. That took 24,401 milliseconds. So that is a long time, right? So if you look at LCP breakdown, it'll show you why something took that long. if you look at the graph here on this side, it will show you what is taking that long. So you'll notice that localhost takes 3100 KB. This is how big your app is and how long it takes to load. And then your data itself that you're fetching from MovieDB is only 8 KB, which means that the most of the time is actually spent loading your local host, loading your client side, loading your React app. These insights are a great way to understand why your app is slow. Now, ideally, your LCP should be in green, and typically I believe 1 second to 2 seconds is when LCP shows green. Your CLS should be 0. So CLS basically means how much items are moving on the page. For us, CLS is 0, which is a good thing. But CLS basically refers to cumulative layout shift. Let's say that maybe we had a scenario where React Flix was here in the center, and then when the app fully loads, it actually moves up to the top. That would be a layout shift. So you want to minimize the layout shift and keep it to 0 as much as possible. And now if you look at our network tab, so looking at this, the main culprit of why this took so long is because we're still processing localhost, which is what happens when you have a client-side rendered app. In our app, we are loading React, and once React is ready, we actually start. So you'll notice here that we are spending 248 milliseconds scripting, and this is typical in a client-side app such as in React. We spend a lot of time loading and executing React, and once we've executed React is when we start fetching our APIs and the data becomes available. This is why server-side render apps or server-side rendered data has become extremely popular. In server-side rendering, you can offload generating this HTML page or a shell of a page on the server so that this time is reduced, and you can also fetch data from the API on the server so that this time is reduced. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of server-side rendering, but I want you to take a look at server-side rendering. TanStack router also supports server-side rendering, and so does TanStack query. So take a look at those, and this will give you an inspiration on how to approach server-side rendering for your apps. Another thing that I want you to take a look at is this profiler, which comes as part of React DevTools. React DevTools comes with components and profiler, and this is a really great way to also know which of your components are re-rendering and causing the app to re-render over and over again. So I'm going to come to profiler, and I'm going to click start profiling. Now, I actually haven't implemented video players yet, but if you're in your app, you have video player implemented, you will see that that can cause a lot more re-renders. For us, I'm going to test the search functionality. Okay, and I'm going to click stop. So here you'll notice that this app rendered 19 times. This is how many re-renders it caused. And why does this re-render so much? If I click on this largest bar, I'll notice here that search component was the one that caused all this re-render. And you'll also notice here that we've got movie card key equals this thing. That is basically why we wanted to keep key as a unique thing, because React will take a look at key to check if it should re-render this or not. But if you'll notice, most of the components are taking 4.8 milliseconds, but there is one that is kind of huge. Now, in order to prevent re-rendering of components, I want you to take a look at two hooks, use memo and use callback. Use memo and use callback are hooks that are used for caching the result of a calculation between re-renders. Use memo works for values, and use callback lets you cache a function. However, with React compiler, which is introduced with React 19, comes as a plugin, you can get memoization automatically for you, eliminating the need for use memo and use callback. And this is a great tool for making sure that your app doesn't have to re-render unnecessarily. Installing React compiler is extremely simple. You do npm install and add the Babel plugin and add it to a Vite config file, and then it's good to go. So let's install this and see how our performance is improved by using React compiler. So I'm going to copy this. Hold on. Put this in here. Okay, let's install Babel plugin from React compiler. And then I just got to set it up in Vite. Vite config. I'm going to install this plugin, React plugin, along with this. Okay, it's good to go. Let's see how this works. I'm going to start the profiler. I'm going to reload this page. Actually, I think I'm still throttling. Undo throttling. Okay, I'm going to come down to profiler. I'm going to start the profiler and I'm going to do the same thing, which is search for the same movie again. And that's it. Okay. Now, if I stop this, we'll see how profiler operated. First, we'll check if our components have been memoized. So you'll notice that if you come down to components, some of these components have this memo magic symbol, right? This magic or this sparkle thingy basically means that your component is being handled by React compiler. It's been memoized by React compiler. So here you'll notice that this component has actually been memoized as well. It says this component has been auto-memoized by React compiler. Nice. And if I look at the profiler itself, even though it says 23 times read render, but you'll notice that the bars have decreased in size. Now, if you check here, you'll notice that these bars take much smaller. So this takes 3.6 seconds. And on average, these bars are taking less than what it was taking previously. So that is another way of making sure that your app is auto-memoized and auto-cached. Finally, because these are all images, it is also important to make sure that we are optimizing for images as well. Now, there's tons of things we can do with images, but the most simple thing that we can do is think about the fetch priority of these images. For example, if you look at this hero background image, this is part of the main view of a user when they land on this page. If this image loads slowly, the user will feel like this app is slow. So that means that we want to make sure that we prioritize this image and render this image as fast as possible. So for that, we're going to add fetch priority equals high. And if you look at these images, there are tons of movies in here, and it's possible that the user never even scrolls to these movies. So this is something that can be lazy loaded, which means that if we go to trending now, we can where is it? Movie card. These images, which is actually the poster path images, can be lazy loaded. So we can add loading equals lazy to this. Now, our app is in a pretty good state that it is ready to be deployed. Remember, when working for an enterprise, in a company, or even on a side project, you want to work iteratively, which is you want to deploy often, you want to test often, and you want to keep this process going. Don't wait for the last minute to submit a big pull request. Make sure that you are pushing often. Make sure that your Git history is clean. Make sure that you are keeping a up-to-date Git repository, and also make sure that you're deploying as and when your features are ready. Don't wait for the last minute to start deploying. So whatever we have so far, we're going to go ahead and deploy it. I love using Netlify for deployment, and deploying with Netlify is extremely easy. This is not sponsored by them. I just love Netlify. Okay, cool. Now, see, I already have a bunch of projects here because I love Netlify. So I'm going to, the best way to deploy in Netlify is to actually deploy your GitHub itself, your GitHub repo itself. Now, I have a GitHub repo for this. It's called, what is it called? YouTube something? YouTube React course. Okay, so I'm going to click on this, and then it says which branch to deploy. I have all of my stuff in the last branch, module 13. So I want to deploy my module 13 branch. It also asks you which command you want, if there's a base directory, any other dependencies that you want to add. Any environment variables. I do need environment variables. Import a .env file. Okay, so I want to do this off screen. Okay, I've added my env file, and now I'm going to say deploy YouTube React course. Cool. And now it is building this up. And if there's any error, it'll actually inform me. Now, what I love about deploying with Netlify is that anytime I make a push to this branch, it'll automatically update and redeploy this branch. I could update my, oh no, something happened. What? What's the problem? Why did it fail? Ooh, AI. I can ask AI, why did it fail? There are unused variables causing TypeScript errors. Okay. Okay, cool. So it says there are unused errors. Fix this issue, address the TypeScript errors and this, remove the factor, blah, blah, blah. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead, make sure that I'm on the right branch. Module 13, performance. I should actually make a new file branch here called module 14, deployment, and I'm going to deploy from that. Okay, where's the problem? Search.tsx. Hold on, why am I showing this? Hold on, never ever show this. Okay. Okay, let's try this again. Where's the problem in search.tsx? Oh yeah, there is unused stuff here. And then movie is unused. What else? Is that it? Okay. Trending now. Okay. I must also remember that I should do a test in here. There is a, what is the TypeScript tests? I think it's TSC or something. Not this, bro. What the fuck? Let's do this. npm run build. Oh, this was a TSC Vite build. Okay. Cannot find module this. So I'm going to install npm i-d. Npm i-d. Install this module. And why you want to run npm run build in your local is because this is exactly how the build process will work on Netlify. So let's do this again. And you want to make sure that this is clear of errors. Okay, building for development, good. Some chunks are larger than 500 KB. Consider using dynamic import. Awesome. I'm loving that it's giving these warnings. Okay, so this looks good. Now, if I git commit, getting ready for deployment, git push. And I'm also gonna pull in deploy settings. I'm gonna pull in a different, oh crap. Wow, I thought changing a deployment branch would be easy. No, hold on. I want to find Netlify, change deployment branch. Branches, production branch defined, deploy preview. Okay. Why is it? Oh, search by branch name. Okay. Module 14. Search and branch. Okay. The only way I found to change the branch was actually to relink this again. So let's do this. Module 14. Deployment. I'm just going to relink it. PNPM run build. Cool. Add environment variables. Import from a .env file. Do this off camera. Okay, deploy this again. And like that, you'll notice that your app is deployed in a minute. And this is how to get your app deployed using Netlify. Super simple. All right, you made it to the end. Congratulations. You just built a fully functioning Netflix clone from scratch and learned React fundamentals like React hooks, learned how to call an API, how to test, how to add TanStack router, how to optimize performance of your app, and even deployment. That is a lot of content to learn. And if you made it to the end, I am so proud of you. This is no small feat. Remember, this is just the starting point. From here, you can dive deeper into state management libraries like Redux. You can add a framework like Next.js or TanStack Start, or you can update your client-side fetching to TanStack Query. Now do me a favor, drop a heart in the comments if you made it this far, and let me know which topic you want me to cover next. I have a full React course on O'Reilly that dives deeper into the fundamentals. Finally, don't forget to join our Discord community where you can ask me questions and continue to chat with our community. It's a great place to connect with other people who are working on the same stuff as you, ask questions, and stay updated with React. Thanks so much for watching. And now, if you want to prepare for your React interview questions, watch this video. I'll see you in the next one.